Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Well, this is going to be episode 3 of my Fluvial Spec 10 litre rebirth setup videos. Approximately, I guess about 20 hours ago or something, I set up this tank. It was reasonably cloudy, but actually wasn't too bad. But as you can see, it's already cleared up a lot. Now obviously I'm going to have a little bit of glare here again, but this is going to be a bit of an update video, and just wanted to give you a bit of a look at how quickly the tank has cleared up. Now I trimmed all the vel back, of course, in the last video, and that's pretty much to the height I think I'm going to leave it. I may actually trim it back a little bit more today. And that's what I'm going to be doing today. Doing a little bit more of a cleanup and checking if I need to reshuffle anything. Now you will see one addition there, which is a little bit of stainless mesh and a bit of moss tied to it. Now, when I put all the plants in, I had this piece of moss left behind. Now, it's not a piece of the Cameroon moss. I think it's either Christmas moss or maybe spiky moss. Someone out there may be able to tell me with a little bit more accuracy what it is, but yeah, anyway, I had a spare piece of stainless steel mesh, so I've just tied that to that, and hopefully I'll get a nice little bush of free moss from that. The Cameroon moss is going quite nicely. I'm going to get out my turkey baster and sort of give everything a little bit of a flush off of debris after the setup that I did. Excuse me while I come around the side here. But yeah, as you can see, it's cleared up quite nicely. And yeah, really love this moss. So good. So what I'm going to be doing today is giving this tank a bit of a clean up. I do have to adjust the heater. The heater's just in the back here, and it's just 1 degree I think more, or maybe 2 degrees more than where I'd like it to be at. So I'm going to pop that heater off and just adjust that a little bit lower. Now that was one thing I also added in the back here, in this back section, was some duckweed and some, I think that's red root floater. I could be wrong, that could be some of my water lettuce, I'm not sure, but anyway, that was from another tank. I just thought I'd put it in there to suck up a little bit of the nutrients and keep this back section clean. But definitely want to clean up this top area, give that a bit of a trim back, and yeah, may touch up the vel a little bit too. But very happy with the way it's come up so far. Alright, so let's get the tools ready. Okay, so I've got my tools out here ready to go. The tweezers, the scissors, the sort of rake / spatula poker thing. I've also got a long kebab stick handy. I really love these for getting into those little nichey spots, and it has a spike on the end, which is really handy. Got a little tub of water there to put my offcuts onto. I've also got some of my plant sort of weights again, just in case I want to do some replanting of some of the offcuts and they're sort of floating a bit, which they probably will. I may even chuck in a couple more of my root tabs. I've sort of just got everything handy still from when I set it up last night. So now I've got my heater turned off as well. I do have a digital thermometer and a TDS monitor, so that's how I measure my temperature. You'll notice I don't have a temperature gauge in there, a thermometer or anything. So yeah, I'm going to whip this light off, and my first stage is going to be this Ambulia. Now I'm going to I want to cut it back so that it's not draped all the way over the top. It looks fantastic, but it's actually blocking out a lot of the light. So I think I'm going to cut that back and then perhaps plant some of the offcuts. I've got a little bit of room in the back corner here, which I might put one into. And possibly even down the side here. next time up the Kofa. Not too sure yet, but anyway, that's what I'm going to do, and I'll give you a look at the finished product in a moment. Okay, so I've done my thing. I did have a little bit of a mishap. As I was trimming and sort of adjusting the valve back here, I actually managed to pull them out of the substrate. So I've actually replanted them, as you can see there. They're a lot deeper. And I put in a little bit of extra soil at the back. I did trim the valve a little bit more to get the light in. I think I was pretty successful with that. I did put in one of the runners from the valve in here, just off to the left. What else have I done? Yes, I adjusted my heater in the back, so that should be pretty much right now. And as you can see, the embulia is trimmed back now. It's not so overflowing. And I did put one little sprig of it, one of the offcuts down the bottom there. So hopefully that might come good and create another branch. Now, of course, all that activity has made the water quite dirty and cloudy again, as you can see. But I'm actually going to get my turkey baster now and just give the mosses a bit of a flush and get a bit more of the dirt sort of flowed up. And sorry, I just managed to fall over there. And yeah, just to try and get rid of a lot of just the little sort of smaller dirt particles that are floating around. You can see here I've got my offcuts there. They're going to go into another tank just as some floating offcuts. But I think it should look much better after this. So what I'm going to do is pause this video for the moment, and once the water's all clear, which might be... actually, I might give it another 24 hours, and we'll come back to it and have a look at whether I've done a pretty good job or not. So I'll see you soon. Okay, so here we are. This is nearly 24 hours later. I finally got a bit of a rest for the day. Been pretty busy today. The sun's starting to go down here, so I can finally pull down the blind and get a little bit darker in here. And finally, I think we will have not as much reflection as normal. So I've cleared out the little coffee table here where I usually have a couple of items on. I think you can see them in the background. And here's a chance to have a good look at the tank. Now, I've pretty much done all of my aquascaping. Done a fair bit of trimming, replanting, and of course moving a couple of things around. My heater seems pretty much correct now. It's running at about 25. I measured that this morning when it was sort of at its coldest in here. This room gets a little bit warmer in the afternoon, so I wanted the heater to be a little bit lower, just to give me a little bit of a buffer. But it shouldn't drop below, say, 24 or 25 at night during our winter, which will be perfect. What else? Yeah, so now there's a little bit more light sort of coming through at the bottoms here. My little cutting that I placed there is getting a little bit of light, which is nice. So I think I cut a couple of more leaves off the crypt just to give the moss a little bit more light. And yeah, I think there's a little bit more light coming down the bottom now. I sort of gave the turkey baster a bit of a squeeze down the bottom here off the almond leaf, etc., and sort of brushed off a bit of the dust that had come out. I think most of the cloudiness is gone. It's probably going to get a little bit clearer probably in the next 24 hours as well. But yeah, it's looking pretty good here. And of course, I wanted it more viewed from this side and this side. So yeah, that nice empty space in the front corner there, which is where I do most of my feeding, and hopefully the shrimp will be hanging out quite a bit on those mosses. And of course, I attached that little sprig of the free moss that I got there on the stainless steel. This side's opened up quite nicely with my replanting, and cut that back quite sharply to allow a lot more light to come in here on the side. As you can see, there's my cutting as well. I put there the runner of the valve is in there as well. and that side's looking quite nice. That of course is where the flow's mostly coming through and sort of being diffused here, but getting a good little bit of oxygenation happening in there in the top. So yeah, I think the tank's come along pretty good. Pretty happy with it. It's very green. At this stage I'm still only put the one lot of plant food in. But of course that's going to require a bit of experimentation, as well as how much light I'm going to use. Now, just before I go, I have got one more little piece of info that I'm going to grab for you. Okay, so I've got a rudimentary chart that I've made here. Now, one thing I've always been interested in when I'm keeping fish, of course, I'm primarily an African cichlid keeper, so there's only really a couple of parameters you worry about when you're keeping Africans. But in a tank set up like this, I think it's pretty fun to see the sort of cycling of the tank and find out what your parameters are. So for the next 4 weeks, I'm going to be doing a fair bit of testing, not necessarily every day. Probably certain items I'll check every day, such as the pH and the temperature, which of course I just have my digital gauge. My TDS and my temperature, which I have the digital gauge to check on. I will probably check on that each day just to make sure that that's pretty consistent. The pH I think shouldn't fluctuate too much, but you know, something like that I might check reasonably often at the beginning. But I'm a little bit more interested in the ammonia, nitrates and nitrites levels as this tank cycles. So as I said, I think previously, I have put a little bit of fish food in there just to help with the cycle. My filter does have a little bit of media that's already been used in another tank. So I guess you could say the filter is activated, but not completely by any means. But here's a couple of the readings that I got today. This was the first time I've done any water testing on this tank. Now, first filled this tank up on the Friday, but didn't do any testing, of course, for that. So the only real testing I did was yesterday, which was with the digital gauge. And then today I've got out all my water test kits and had a look. So I found my pH was 6.6. As I said earlier, my temperature was around 25. My TDS was 238. My ammonia level was 0. My nitrite was fairly high at 5. My nitrate was fairly low at 1. And then I had a KH and a GH of around 2 or 3. Now, of course, these are sort of close enough amounts to call them those numbers. I might be a little bit out on the charts, but yeah, it's going to be around that level there. So now, of course, when you first get a tank, it's going to be not cycled. So I'm expecting a few of those numbers to change one way or the other. And you can see here I've got some highlighted dates for the week. Now, I plan to do plant food on a Saturday and a Wednesday for starters, and see if that's enough or too much or too little. I suspect it's actually going to be too much, but that's something I'll figure out as we go along. Now, Tuesdays are highlighted in orange there. Now, they're going to be my water change day. Now, I'm either going to do 25 or a 50% water change on those days. And then test the figures on the Wednesday before I do a plant feed, and then of course check them on the Thursday and just see if the plant food that I've got here, if you can have a look, it's the LCA Low Tech Complete, if that's in any way affecting parameters, so I can decide whether perhaps I'm feeding too much or too little. And as the tank cycles, of course, we should see a few changes in sort of the nitrites, for example. And of course our soil and what are they again? Yeah, you think I would... almond leaves, yes, my almond leaves. And of course, I haven't forgotten. Now, if anyone out there has already mentioned this type of wood that I have, it's the sort of very shrimp-friendly wood, which has all the holes in it. I believe it's called cholla wood. And there you go. I said I would get the name of it in this video. Now, as you can see, that it's got the cool tunnel effect. I hope that's coming through on the camera. So they can sort of go right through that tunnel all the way to the back of the tank and to the front. It's sort of a little shrimp highway. I hope that's going to be pretty cool for them. And of course they can go underneath this sort of tree root and the almond leaf and through all the plants. So I think that should look pretty good. So I'm going to leave it there for this episode. If anyone's got any questions, yeah, please put them through below, or any advice. I'm definitely happy to get any advice off people. Now, hopefully, the next episode will just be an update on the tank and see how things are going, see how all my figures are turning out, and perhaps any updates on what I'm doing with feeding, lighting, etc. Hopefully I won't have to do any more trimming or aquascaping. I think I've pretty much got it where I like it at the moment. But of course we'll have to see how that goes. But I hope you've enjoyed the series so far. And yeah, the next episode might be in a little while, maybe in a week or two or something. But yeah, we'll see how we go. But I hope you'll catch me in the next episode. And thank you for watching this one and any of the previous episodes you've watched too. I've really enjoyed setting up this tank. As an African cichlid keeper, I don't really ever get the chance to have plants or do anything like this. And it's really cool to have a small little tank like this and have a bit of fun. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Bye for now.